What is up, Rose? Welcome back. This may be a bit different from my usual videos. However, I thought I would want to do something special since I've finished up Liel'roz's journey here in Morrowind. Doesn't mean Liel'roz is gone forever. Oh no, his journey is only just beginning. However, if you haven't seen Liel'roz's journey all the way into the end, then there are definitely some spoilers in this video, and you may want to watch his whole series, starting with the Morrowind playthrough, then Retirement Optional. There's a midpoint which transitions into Tribunal pretty well, and then by the end of Retirement Optional, after you finish Tribunal playthrough, it transitions pretty well into Blood Moon, and Blood Moon is where things end off. Alright, so with that caveat out of the way, and with you nice and warned, let's get on into it, shall we? Alright, so where to begin? Ah, yes, probably with the beginning, where Liel'roz comes from. Well, I'm not going to fully spoil it, because I will get into a bit more of a deep dive into Liel'roz's backstory in his Oblivion playthrough. But furthermore, Liel'roz started off in Elsewhere as a Horoplod, a part of a cult of Sheogorath worshippers, following the Skooma cat Sheogorath, of course, in Elsewhere. And Liel'roz himself, well, he was a bit of a skooma addict at most, and he was always pretty well, and he was always a very skilled magician. Not quite a magic user that's really good at using spell first and then blade last, but rather someone who was a bit of a trickster, who had tricks up his sleeves. He always had cards with him, had a few extra coins on him. He always had very good ways to flick his hands around and make things that didn't belong to him, well, appear in his pockets all of a sudden. And, well, he did get into quite some trouble, and, well, he would do some tricks, do some dirty deeds here and there, perform a thievery there, and maybe a skooma trade here, and he got in trouble with the law quite a bit in the past, and of course, this always led to some trouble with the Imperial Legion. But of course, his trouble would really meet its end, in fact, would probably meet its beginning as well, whenever he started to meet up with a bit of a comrade, a Horoplod known as Uncle Sweetshare, a Nord who was a bit mad and a very, very powerful skooma dealer. He was very skilled in the arts of making skooma that, well, would get you hooked, and if you were an addict, it would be hard to not overdose. That was his whole gimmick. And, well, he saw Liel'roz, saw his potential, and noticed that he was on his road to become a High Jester, the highest rank in the Horoplods. But he couldn't let that slide. So, he left a big old crate of skooma right outside of Liel'roz's doorstep, in a wagon. It was enticing. Liel'roz, well, he wanted him some skooma, so he partook, and partook some more. Of course, in this timeline, the Imperial Legion went knocking on his door, for they had an anonymous tip, and they saw him drinking himself to death and threw him right on into the Imperial City prison. That's where the Emperor himself saw something in Liel, and decided, for whatever reason, to send him on a boat to Vvardenfell. This is where Liel'roz, well, would begin his journey. For that skooma quite messed up his mind, for you see, Liel'roz lost himself, in a sense, to the point where Sheogorath himself had to fix his mind by placing a temporary host, a certain frost troll, if you will, to take hold and take control, at least for a moment, for a while, to hold things down while Liel'roz could get back on his feet. And so Liel'roz was, well, no more, and Little Froz had to take over. And, well, on the boat, Little Froz awoken in the body of Liel'roz and met with Jib, and of course was released, and of course had to get up on his feet, and was told to meet with Caius Casares, the Imperial Blades agent in Valmora, and had to perform some business with him to basically try and figure out a bit of a mystery about some sort of Nerevarine cult and Sixth House cults, but all that really didn't matter too much, for, well, Little Froz wasn't exactly the mind of a very sane individual either, and, well, he wanted to get some good trickery done, so he joined up with the Mages Guild to get some more magic done, just to make himself a bit more powerful, and of course, he had to also join up with the Thieves Guild to steal a diamond here, maybe do a bit of trickery there, and also get a nice setup so we could, say, do something naughty and get away with it by simply paying off the Thieves Guild. Because, of course, the Thieves Guild have friends in high places, and corruption lies deep within the Guard and the Imperial Legion. But, of course, where things really got interesting was when Lil Froz decided to join House Hlaalu. Of course, House Hlaalu was quite the best guild he could ever join, though, honestly, there were some tough moments in it. You see, House Hlaalu was definitely a place of business, of opportunity, of trickery. One of the very first guilds Lil Froz had was, well, to go and steal some sort of alchemical supplies in Vivec. Of course, he held off there, had to go recover a puzzle box for Caius Casares and some sort of skull from some sort of ancestral tomb. Got his archery trained up pretty well, able to take out some sort of guy named Snowy Granius on a bridge pretty well with his stealth archery. And of course he adventured on. It wasn't too bad, though of course there were definitely some trials and tribulation along the way. You see, Lil Froz, well, he eventually made his way through and got his way into Vivec City. And when he was in Vivec, well, he had to do a few tasks. He had to get a bit of information from an Argonian, a Khajiit, and a Dunmer woman. Well, he also managed to steal the alchemical formulas with ease, somehow able to easily activating Chameleon in a corner, and was able to just slip underneath that one alchemist's line of sight. It was honestly surprising to see. You'd have to be there to see it yourself. But anyways, with the alchemical ingredients, with the alchemical recipe in hand, Liel'roz went outwards and off to the Black Sholt Corner Club to basically speak with the Argonian, who, well, had more notes about the Sixth House cult. Was it the Nerevarine cult? Hard to remember. Well, anyways, he had the notes that Caius needed, only he had some troublesome foes to deal with, some troublesome fools to deal with first. Only these troublesome fools were also in House Hlaalu, so it didn't take much convincing from Liel'roz to simply tell the troublesome fools to look the other way. so that way he could guide the lizard off to Jabasha's rare books, where he also bought the Progress of Truth, because it looked like a fine and interesting book, may prove useful, wouldn't you know? And of course, from there, he fled onwards to St. Ulm's, and went down below to speak with the Khajiit. This Khajiit, Ahir, told of the census and exis agent that was looking for her. Well, Liel'roz, being the absolute trickster he was, simply walked up to the census and exits agent and said that Ahir was off in the mainland and that he completely missed her. He bought it like it was nothing. He fled that place and went elsewhere. And of course, with that being the case, Ahir was very, very pleased, and of course handed Leo the notes that she needed to give him. And Leo, of course, went onwards to the Vivek Library to speak with, well, the Dunmer woman, who apparently was one of the underlings, one of the workers of the main tribunal temple, but was also a descendant priest in disguise. Apparently, this person right here was a part of another major cult, and told Leo himself that that Progress of Truth book he had, well, he definitely needed it, and that he should definitely give it to Caius Casades. That would probably prove useful later. Certainly it would. He returned to Caius Casades with all these information, and of course the agent was very pleased with this. Decided to tell him though that he would definitely that Liel'roz would definitely need to be more well trained before he would be ready to accept any more tasks, because Liel'roz was doing all of this while only ascending to level 2. He wasn't very trained or skilled as a magician quite yet. No, he still had some training to do. He still had a long ways to go before he could be the powerful magician he is now, or he is now, as he's withering away in a cell and slowly losing his power. But anyways, I digressed. Liel'roz decided to get most of his training by going to House Hlaalu, in the main House Hlaalu Great House in Balmora, and decided to take up some more guilds, some more quests. Had to deal with Gwarhides, had to deal with a egg mine, which he quite enjoyed dealing with himself, at least the mind of Liel'roz, who really enjoyed the idea of going into the egg mine, killing the queen, and then going to the owner of that egg mine, telling him that he would spare the queen in exchange for 1,000 gold, just to go turn in the quest and get another 500 gold right on top of that. Oh, House Hlaalu was more than happy with that, and he fit right into House Hlaalu in suit, gaining plenty of wealth along the way. And of course, going on further, Liel'roz had to do a few more quests here and there, had to deal with a murder mystery, and that required him to head back to this guild, this corner club that had a bunch of racist Dunmer who hated Khajiit, despised Khajiit, spat in his face. Oh, he hated them all. So he went back and gladly killed the murder suspect in cold blood, and then of course got rid of his bounty before turning in the quest, getting some more gold, and then of course he had one of the most enjoyable quests along the way. You see, he finished things off with House Hlaalu and with all the grinding session he had by simply doing this one little quest called Ebony Mines. The ebony trade. He had to deal with the ebony trade, and the best way to do that, well, he had to either go to some mine to shut it down so that way the ebony mine that House Redoran has up is shut down and no longer in use, or go into Ebonheart and get the person who's trading with the House Redoran House Redoran to get ebony to start trading with House Lalu. Well, Liel'roz, being the overachiever, went to the mine, killed the head leader of the mine so it could no longer be run, and did so by using a magical taunt, so that way he wouldn't get a bounty. And then went right to Ebonheart, went up to the head counselor, and used a little bit of diplomacy, magical diplomacy and charm, to persuade him to, buy from House Lalu. It was quite the sight. And of course, doing this and overachieving got him a full suit of glass armor, or at least a good chunk of it. He managed to go sell a lot of this, and of course, Caius Casades was happy with how much grinding he got done, and decided to, well, send him on some various quests, decided to send him off to go speak with Hassad Zansubini, or whatever his name was, an Ashlander who came from the Urshalaku camp, and basically get some more information about the Nerevarine cult. And, well, apparently there was something very desperate something very urgent with the Urshalaku camp that Caius Casades needed Liel'roz to desperately investigate. So, he told Liel'roz to start investigating the Urshalaku camp itself and learn from them about the Nerevarine cult. And then, of course, handed him the coded documents that Liel'roz had to hand Caius Casades right in the beginning. Well, these documents spoke of the fact that Liel'roz was in fact the Nerevarine the whole time, or at least someone who could become the Nerevarine, someone who would fit the bill to become the Nerevarine. For you see, the Nerevarine is an outlander orphan. Yeah, not a very rare kind of specimen. In fact, there are plenty of Outlander orphans around, plenty of Nerevarines in the past that have all failed, and of course Liel'roz was simply one of the most common ones. Though he definitely fit the bill, he was a Horrorplod through and through, though he never knew his parents. He was kind of, well, adopted into the Horrorplods. Well, he never knew his parents, so of course he would fit the bill perfectly. And of course he went on the road, meeting with Jeffrey along the way, petting him a few times, and it was quite enjoyable. Getting some skooma as he went along the road, though this would be a bit of his downfall, for as he found skooma on some dead adventurer and started to partake, this would start to reawaken something in him, but would also start to break a bit of an oath. For you see, the reason he was here in Vardenfell, well, not just because he was the Nerevarine, but he was also pardoned. Mostly, he was pardoned as a way to test to see if the Horrorplods could actually change, if they could actually break their ways of the Skooma Cats, and if they could, then they could be spared by the Imperial Legion. This would soon bring a huge downfall for the Horrorplods, and this would soon bring something terrible to the Horrorplods. But Liel'roz was happy in the beginning, and continued to press onwards, on foot, straight to the Urshalaku camp. He had to deal with an assassin attempt even, as he was ascending greatly all the way up to level 7. But he made it to the Urshalaku camp all the same, and had to do a bit of a trial just to get their trust. He had to basically get a bow that's some sort of old bow from a mine that's one of the that was one of the ancestors' bows, essentially. The Ashcan's great grandfather or something along the line. Yes, his bow, the Bonebiter bow of Sul-Pool. This would soon be Liel'roz's go-to bow of choice for quite some time. Oh, he would use this bow everywhere he went, using its damage agility effects to basically turn the tides of battle and make the enemy slightly less likely to hit Liel'roz, while also making Liel'roz more likely to hit his opponent. A very good bow, to say the least. Well, he definitely made some good use of this bow, especially since the Ashcan was so impressed that he decided to let Liel'roz keep the bow. And of course, uh, not all was finished, for you see, this was only the beginning. You see, the Ashcan simply had that as the first trial. There were plenty more trials to come. Liel'roz learned a bit more about the Nerevarine cult, and that he could meet the Nerevarine specifications, and when Liel'roz went back to Caius Casades to speak of such a matter, well, Caius Casades spoke of some sort of six-house base being seen. Ilanubi, a place being held by Dagoth Guards, and apparently this place was being set up and starting to cause some real havoc. Liel'roz had to go to an Imperial fort near Old Rune to get more details. Apparently, Dagoth Guards and his cult, his mad cult, though Dagoth Guards, the name itself sounded like a girl's name for some reason. At least Liel'roz thought so at the time. But yes, Dagoth Guards was a horrible cultist that was twisting people, bending their spines with corporates and sending them off to let out horrible messages, twisted, demented messages, before these guards would perish or worse, become horrible beasts and become twisted by Dagoth Ur's madness. Liel'roz had to head out to Ilanubi, resting in the background while fighting through Daedra and six-house abominations alike, before eventually fighting Dagoth Guards and giving Dagoth Guards some scars. And well, when Dagoth Guards lie dead, he let off one last curse. Curse you, Liel'roz! I curse you with my master's divine disease of corpus! And Liel'roz was twisted with corpus himself. Caius Casades had some good news, though. For though Caius Casades didn't want to speak to Liel'roz, he did tell Liel'roz of a place, Telfir. Apparently, Divithfir had a corpusarium below his Telvanni tower, and could possibly cure, if not just treat, Liel'roz's condition. Well, Divithfir more than had the right remedy to deal with Liel'roz, and the only thing is, well, Liel'roz had to do a bit of a favor first. Not like it was that big of a deal, just had to deliver some boots to the last living dwarf, which happened to be in the corpusarium, so it wasn't that far. And yes, so the last living dwarf was there. So Liel'roz could at least get some answers at what what happened to the Dwemer. Well, Yagrim didn't really have much about what happened to the Dwemer, only that he was in the plains of Oblivion while the Dwemer were disappearing, and had some theories that maybe Lord Kagrenak used his tools and messed with the heart of Lorkhan in a way that, well, messed with the Dwemer. Not really good theory, but it was all he really had, and all he could really speculate on. But alas, Liel'roz went back to Divithfir, who didn't have a real cure, but rather a potion that could treat the Corpus and give Liel'roz a better version of the Corpus disease, one that basically had all the positives with none of the negatives. You see, Liel'roz would go from slowly going mad and losing his intelligence while growing stronger each day, to suddenly being perfectly immune to any and all common disease, blight disease, and Corpus disease. This was a blessing, and also met the very one of the trials of the Nerebrine prophecies, the third trial, to be exact. Soon the fourth would have to be met. Well, you see, Liel'roz went back to Caius Casades, who, of course, had to leave, back to the Imperial city, due to a skooma. Though, this was mostly a test. Liel'roz wouldn't notice this at the time, but Caius Casades was also an agent that was meant to check on Liel'roz and ensure that he would avoid the stuff. And he made sure to have some of the skooma in his place and told Liel'roz to keep the place tidy to see if Liel'roz would drop the skooma and if he would dispose of the stuff. Well, Liel'roz would not abide by this, or he didn't really know of this, nor did he really care too much. This was, of course, his downfall. But of course, Liel'roz did have one last mission Caius Casades gave him, to go find that one Dunmer woman, the descendant priest, and break her out of jail. Liel'roz, of course, had to do this. He went and did this quite easily, though this wasn't really a easy feat for most. You see, Liel'roz had to go up to this asteroid, Baldur, this moon that Liel'roz's lord, Sheogorath, threw at Vivek, just to try and teach Vivek a lesson, just for Vivek to freeze frame and leave above Vivek to teach Vivek a lesson. Honestly, Vivek sounds like more of a Sheo-blessed follower than Liel'roz at this point, but hey, it is what it is. Liel'roz goes up to the meteor, and of course manages to get a key off of this one ordinator who basically said, oh yeah, I'll tell the other ordinators that you magically put me out, knocked me out, just to get this key. You know, just to slip by without any real trouble or tribulation. So Liel'roz was able to slip on into the asteroid, the moon, Baldur, and was able to make his way into the central prison cells where a bunch of ordinators was waiting to ambush him. Though Liel'roz was able to fly overhead, land down right in front of the prison cell with the person inside, broke on in, freed the Dunmer woman with a divine intervention scroll, and then used one himself before going to Holomanion to find out more about the descendant priest. And that was when Liel'roz learned something very great. You see, Liel'roz was not just any Nerebrine, he was the one they fear. Dragonborn! Yes, but jokes aside, the Nerebrine is said to be he that is born of dragon, the Dragonborn, though that wouldn't really be his main title that most would know him in, at least at this time, in Morrowind standards. However, I digress. Liel'roz, also known as Liel'roz, had to learn, went and learned more about the lost prophecies. This, of course, was exactly what he needed to hand over to Nabani over in the Urshalaku camp, the wise woman, to basically learn more about the prophecies. And well, that is where the wise woman spoke to Liel'roz and told him that he is now on his way to becoming the Nerebrine at full force, and that he is doing more than most, and that he should find the moon and star ring, an item that will basically grant him the mark of the Nerebrine. This would of course be the fourth trial of the Nerebrine, and of course to achieve this he first had to, well, speak with the Ashcan to basically be told that he had to gain his trust a little more by going to Kogaroon, another 6-house base. But this time he had to retrieve Corpus Reapings, a 6-house cup, and the Shadow Shield. Of course, he had to. Of course, Liel'roz had to fight his way through various ascended sleepers and ash ghouls alike, alongside even a few flame astronauts, and even found a vampire that locked himself in a room, and a couple of adventurers who probably locked themselves in rooms adjacent just out of fear of said vampire. Though that was mere theory, a simple game theory. But of course Liel'roz ventured further in, finding the Corpus Sweepings, the 6-house cup, and eventually the Shadow Shield to bring back to the Ashcan, in which case the Ashcan simply told him, hey, keep that stuff, you may need it on your adventures. And of course the Ashcan named him the Ashcan said that he would be named Nerebrine in good time, and told him of the first riddle, and of course the riddle of the fourth trial that the Nerebrine would have to answer in order to prove his worth. Basically, something along the lines of within the teeth of the claw, the eye of the pearl, and then the star would be the key. It was a confusing riddle, but one that Liel'roz understood. For you see, there were mountains way off to the east that could have been the teeth and the claw, and deep beneath that could have been like the eye of the pearl going southward into the valleys. And then, of course, the star is the key. Well, of course, anyone who knows anything about Azura knows that the holy hours are dawn and dusk, so going in only at dawn or dusk would make sense. So, of course, Liel'roz manages to make his way down the Great Valley, and manages to make his way to the Cave of the Incarnate, where he eventually finds the Ring of the moon and star. And this ring will of course mark him as Nerebrine, granting him the ability to, well, pass as Nerebrine. He goes back to the Ursulaku camp where he's named Ursulaku Nerebrine and is told that he needs to be named Nerebrine by 4 Ashlander tribes and 3 great houses. Now, he's named Nerebrine in the Ursulaku camp, but he still has to go very far eastward to the northern side. Let's see here, that would be, what was it again? I forget, it has been quite a long time. But of course, Liel'roz had to go to one of the northeastern Ashlander tribes in the Grayslands in order to basically get named Nerebrine there. But to do so, he had to get the wise woman to basically find sanctity in the northern Sheogorath shrine, which of course Liel'roz would be able to easily do, being a past Horriblid. So he went north, and basically killed all of the ordinators that were killing his buddies, his Horriblid buddies, and decided to join in the dance, playing with some of his old comrades, and eventually finding the leader, the high jester of this place, and told her that, well, his buddies, his buddies should probably hold off on hurting these Ashlanders who needed sanctuary. Of course, the High Jester here didn't quite believe Liel'roz at first, but with some powerful seduction, the mad magician managed to just slip past on a speech check and managed to get the Ashlanders to have safe passage, and of course sanctity in the Sheogorath Shrine. And so Liel'roz went southwards to the Zanab camp, where he spoke with another Ashcan. This Ashcan was a real jerkwad and wanted a whole 2 trials just to name Liel'roz Nerevarine, and so he had to kill a vampire and then make a slave this guy's wife. Of course, he wanted a highborn Telvanni wife, but, well, the wise woman just suggested, hey, just buy a slave, throw on a skirt and a high, exquisite shirt, and call it a day. So Liel'roz did just that, brought the slave in, and the Zanab Ashcan bought it like it was nothing. And so Liel'roz was named Nerevarine of 3 clans and had to be named Nerevarine of 1 more, the Arabanisim clan. This one was more of a combat trial, as Liel'roz went in and the Ashcan basically said, hey, we don't want to name you Nerevarine, we don't want Nerevarines in the slightest. So the wise woman simply said, hey, if you want to be named Nerevarine, you're going to need a Ashcan that will name you Nerevarine. Of course, there's one primed and ready to be named Ashcan to name you Nerevarine, only you need to get rid of the competition. So Liel'roz killed all of the Ashcan and all of his followers, and decided to take all of his major artifacts and go to this, well, let's say shy Ashcan in the making, and gave him a few artifacts of his people to basically teach him a bunch of lessons and speak a bunch of high lies about bravery and stupendousness and strength of will and whatnot, and he bought it and named Liel'roz Nerevarine as a result. And so eventually Liel'roz was the Nerevarine of all 4 clans, and soon had to be named the Hortator. So, Liel'roz had to make his way over to Vivec to speak with Crassius Curio, the writer of the lusty Argonian Maid, and of course he adored the fact that Liel'roz was more than a potent comrade in House Hlaalu, and got quite excited, asked Liel'roz to take off all his clothes. Of course, Liel'roz had to do what any Hlaalu would have to do, and had to remove his clothes as a result. He didn't like it, he just had to do it. And well, Caius Casades, Crassius Curio, well, he enjoyed this. He thought it was perfect material for a new book he was working on, though you'd probably want to change the protagonist around to a Argonian maid, Lispser tale, I think he called her, and of course decided to get a bit more from Liel'roz, wanted to get a kiss, and then wanted Liel'roz to get recommendations from everyone else in the Hlaalu Council. Well, Liel'roz decided to head down to the other different council halls, decided to first visit House Dren, since the Dren plantation, since Crassius Curio said that Orvis Dren would probably have the most trouble in naming him Hortator. So Liel'roz went to House Dren, the Dren plantation, and noticed that Dren plantation was, well, a plantation that held a lot of slaves, and a lot of these slaves were Khajiit, and Liel'roz just wouldn't let this stand, so he went up to Orvis Dren, killed him since he was working with the Sixth House anyways, and then decided to liberate the entire plantation and eventually get the keys to free the slaves, after which he decided to celebrate with some skooma, another descent into his downfall that would eventually destroy his Horblot buddy's reputation for the Imperial Legion. Well, Liel'roz partook of the skooma and went on a bit of a trip, hallucinating and viewing himself in this twisted, blocky version of Skyrim, where he eventually had to run around Riverwood and learn that he just had to go to Whiterun, where he learned of some sort of priest of Archay that locked herself in the Crypt of the Dead, and so he went to free her, learned that the Draugr were rising because of some King Orgrim who has been dead for thousands of years, so he went to Bleak Falls Barrow to investigate, went through some trial and tribulation, going through some traps, and eventually found the king himself simply suffocating in a wall due to some Bethesda jank even in Minecraft. Oh, or the skooma trip. Well, he decided to sit in King Ogrim's tomb, and eventually he came down from his skooma trip, where Sheogorath himself was appraising him for completing a trial that he completed along the way on becoming Nerevarine. For you see, Liel'roz, between a bit of his adventures, decided to, of course, partake in Sheogorath's quest, and of course decided to go stab a giant bullnetch with the Fork of Horriplation. The item, the main artifact of the Horriplot people, by the way. And of course, Sheogorath told Liel'roz that it was about time he handed over his people's artifact to get the better fork, the Spear of Bitter Mercy, the very namesake of the Temple of Bitter Mercy, which the Horriplot people reside in, and where their main base of operations is in elsewhere, where the skooma cat thrives. Well, he got the Spear of Bitter Mercy, but of course the skooma cat also aided Liel'roz on his skooma trip and allowed him to get recommendations from the other counselors along the way so he could become Horttor a lot faster. So Liel'roz was eventually House Hlaalu Horttor and had to become House Redoran Horttor. This was, of course, quite easy. All he really had to do was find one of the people who would basically make him Horttor and vouch for him the most, and would have to find this person's son who was kidnapped by Venom, one of the main Redoran bad guys, who basically may as well have been working with the Sixth House, for he was one of the hate all Outlanders kind of guys. And well, when Liel'roz got all the recommendations of all the other counselors of House Redoran, Venom himself basically challenged Liel'roz to a duel to the death to basically wipe that smirk off of Liel'roz's face, because how dare this random Khajiit Outlander come in and try to become House Redoran Horttor. So of course Liel'roz destroyed and vanquished Venom in the arena, and became House Redoran Horttor. And then eventually had to go to House Telvanni to become Horttor. He had to go across various towers, speaking with various Telvanni warlords and doing their mad trials, mostly just convincing them that he's Hortator. And of course, with a bunch of smooth talking, it really just saved everything over. He didn't really have to do any real trials, he just had to speak with the Telvanni warlords, and most of them were fine with making him Hortator. But of course, there was one that didn't, Gothrin. Gothrin was, of course, a very big pain in the rear end, big pain in the tail, but of course Liel'roz stood strong and defeated Gothrin through trial and error, and eventually was named Telvanni Hortator. With him being named Hortator and Nerevarine of all the great houses and clans, Ashlander clans, he would now be able to speak with Lord Vivec himself. And Lord Vivec granted Liel'roz the mighty artifact of Wraithguard, and told him to find Keening and Sunder, and told him to slap the heart of Lorcan with Sunder, and stab with a flurry of jabs against the heart of Lorcan with Keening. And to do this would destroy Dagothr and save Vardenfell from its blight. And Liel'roz did just this, and accepted a gift from the hands of God, the Ring of Azura. But of course Liel'roz was quite tired by this time, and decided to retire. So, and of course, around this time was around the time where Liel'roz's main mind was beginning to eventually bloom, and eventually speak up, due to the overconsumption of skooma, allowing him to, well, find himself once again. And of course, the old Liel'roz was able to speak out and basically say that, yeah, very well, we may as well retire. But that was not the end. No. You see, they went to retire, and Liel'roz decided to partake in some more skooma with Liel'roz awakened. Doing this allowed Liel'roz to take full control and go on various adventures. He would strip naked in this racist club to streak around the place to prank them. He would run around Balmora doing pranks here and there, eventually going out to the various other Daedric shrines to do their quests, doing a few magic shows here and there, and eventually he would get bored of the adventures, and eventually start to settle in with the Morrowind tongue, who he did a few great quests for, just doing some assassination quests here and there, though the Morag tongue was quite boring at some point. Eventually he started to settle in, began to retire, and it was around that time when he got a letter, a very grim letter, from a Dark Brotherhood agent, who spoke of how, Ninetoes, one of Liel'roz's informants, as one of the Blade's agents, the Blade agent operative now, due to Caius Casade's handing the title to him, his informant Ninetoes was assassinated by the Dark Brotherhood. And to learn more, he would have to head to Mournhold. There he basically found a buddy Calvis, a mercenary who was able to be hired to help him track down and take out all the Dark Brotherhood agents, and of course the one that took out Ninetoes, to get revenge, though Calvis gave his life in exchange for taking down the head of the Dark Brotherhood. They got revenge, though Liel'roz did notice that there was more in Mournhold than meets the eye, that the place was uneasy. There were apparently goblins being trained up down below, and apparently there was like cults. Speaking of Daedra awakening and wreaking havoc across Tamriel with Oblivion gates opening across all over the place. That was some crazy mumbo jumbo, and Liel'roz had to work with Almalexia to put an end to all of these cults and to teach the people of Vardenfell the very power Almalexia had, though Liel'roz noticed that this goddess Almalexia was a bit, well, on the insane side, though he still worked with her nonetheless, and eventually got the Brazos Maze Band to hand to her so that way he could do more questing for her, such as getting the legendary blade True Flame, the blade of the Nerevarine, and eventually he was tasked with going to the Clockwork City to defeat Sotha Sil, for he was told that Sotha Sil has gone mad, though he saw the opposite in Almalexia. Though, I digress, Liel'roz went through the Clockwork City to locate Sotha Sil to find him already mangled, and to find Almalexia very much ready to destroy Liel'roz, though Liel'roz was no mere Khajiit, and was able to defeat Almalexia, and with Almalexia's death, well, there were two goddesses down, two living gods down, the false gods, and there was only one to remain, but he decided to spare him, at least for now, since Vivek was quite a good friend to him, up to this point at the very least. So, Liel'roz went back to Balmora, where he would retire for quite some time. Though, while resting his head, enough was enough, and eventually he had to do a bit more here and there. There was a bit more filler, a Halloween episode or whatnot, and eventually he got a letter from Vivek himself. Speaking of, well, a bit of a request. You see, Vivek has lived for thousands of years up to this point, and with Sotha Sil and Almalexia gone, and his powers slowly fading, well, Vivek decided to link Baldur with the Dragonfires, because his power itself was fading enough that he himself could no longer move Baldur out of the way of Vivek, and he was very much regretting his decision of leaving it there as a reminder to the people. So he linked his power, he linked the dragon flames with Baldur by getting into contact with the Empire, and as such, well, he asked for Liel'roz to do one thing that only the Nerevarine could possibly do, due to the fact that the Nerevarine is the one that controls time itself. He asked for the Nerevarine to kill him. And well, Liel'roz had to put an end to Vivek, put him out of his misery so he may once again be with Almalexia and Sotha Sil, to be with his friends in the realm of the Ten Combatants of Boethia. And well, Liel'roz wasn't quite the same after that. Liel'roz didn't really know what to think after that, though he did manage to do a bit more trial and tribulation. He decided to try and get a bit more learned about the last living dwarf, but the Yagrim Bogran decided to rip Liel'roz off, and that was a mistake, so Liel'roz decided to extinct the dwarven race, but he also decided to free all of the slaves and the rest of Vardenfell, and eventually decided to settle down once again, before eventually speaking to a Nord who sold him weapons in the past, Thalier, who revealed himself to be an ancient vampire of the past who decided to, well, cure himself and settle down in Balmora. But of course, this vampire had a quest for Liel'roz if he was willing to be inclined to partake in this quest. You see, Thrander here didn't really get any real closure on what happened to his uncle that he had learned necromancy in order to bring back to, well, allow him to do some sort of task that, well, Thrander never knew what this task was. He needed closure. So Liel'roz went north to Solstheim to try and get closure, going to Fort Frostmoth, where he learned about the East Empire Company, which he decided to join up with. This was possibly the last mistake he would make, and possibly the last nail in the coffin when it came to the deal with his Horrorplot buddies. For you see, joining the East Empire Company set up a background check. They would need to get an agent of any kind, possibly even a Blades agent, to investigate Liel'roz's manor, to basically see if he has any illegal goods on his possession, to make sure that he's all clean and all clear. Yes, well, Liel'roz continued onwards with a bit of questing, leading some people off to get Raven Rock settled in, while also dealing with a bit of a booze situation, a bit of a booze problem in the fort, and deal with some weapon smuggling. Well, he went off to deal with these weapon smugglers just to find out when he came back that a bunch of werewolves came in, destroyed the entire fort, and kidnapped Captain Falks. This could not stand, so Liel'roz decided to head north to the Skull to hand them a skull, to speak with the Skull. And eventually he, well, got some quests from Jack Black to basically do some trials, to learn the ways of the land, to try and prove himself to the Skull, so that way he could actually do some quests and learn more about these werewolves. And he kind of got carried away working with the Skull, and decided to just continue doing their trials and tribulation. Eventually, one of these trials was to actually get closure on what happened to Thorander's uncle Aislip. For you see, there was a fire that occurred on a lake. This was apparently one of the first bad omens of the blood moon approaching. So that was quite a horrible occurrence. But Liel'roz had to delve in anyways and learn more about this Aislip fellow, was told to kill this Aislip fellow. But alas, he ventured in and decided to spare Aislip when this fellow told him that, well, Aislip was brought back simply to maintain the place from deep under and make sure that the skull was kept safe from some powerful demons held deep below. Liel'roz decided to team up with Aislip to get rid of these powerful dire frost atronachs, and Aislip, as a result, decided to hand Liel'roz his ring, the phylactery holding his power, and told him to hand it to Thorander, his nephew, to grant him closure once and for all. This, of course, the fire on the lake was only the first of the bad omens, and eventually Liel'roz had to, well, get ready. You see, Liel'roz went back to the fort, to the Skull Village, just to find that werewolves attacked the place. And these werewolves decided to kidnap, well, the chieftain of the place, Jack Black. And so there were two leaders, both kidnapped now, Liel'roz had to, well, do some trials after he got cured of his lycanthropy to basically get ready for the Blood Moon. He had to get the Totem of Claw and Fang, kill a beast, and bring his heart back, the beast's heart back to the Skull Village. And then he had to investigate the deaths of some Horkers and see if the people over in Castle Karstag had anything to do with it. Well, Karstag, the frost giant, was in fact kidnapped as well by the werewolves, and then soon after, Liel'roz was kidnapped. He was brought in by Hircine to the hunting grounds underneath a great glacier, and of course, Liel'roz had to fight his way out, saving Captain Falx, and eventually killing the chieftain Jack Black when he turned on Liel'roz, turning into a werewolf. And then Sheogorath spoke to Liel'roz right before the final encounter, telling Liel'roz that he will soon fight Hircine's aspect, and when he does, to fight Hircine as one of his hunters to embarrass him. Liel'roz tried to fight Hircine as a werewolf, thinking that that was the trial. For you see, Liel'roz did get the ring of Hircine and was able to transform, though Hircine's aspect was quite too powerful for him to face him as a werewolf, and decided to leap up onto a greater balcony to place an ebony arrow in the back of Hircine's head, ending him. And of course, doing this was, of course, a way to fight the hunter as a hunter, only a hunter of the old, a hunter that the hunter himself would call the prey. This, of course, amused Sheogorath too much. However, when Liel'roz finished these trials and decided to start heading back to Balmora to settle down, he made his way past Fort Frostmoth, where he said hello to Captain Falx, who he rescued, and learned from Falco that he was fired from the East Empire Company since his background check came in negative. And apparently, he had to speak with the captain of Fort Moonloft. This was grave news for Liel'roz, for he knew sure and well that now, more than ever, that the Horoplods would be seen by the Empire as nothing more than a chaotic threat, and that they would have to be executed on sight, and that his Horoplod people would not be saved, and that he wouldn't be saved either. However, he simply had to try his best to maybe talk his way out of this one. So he went to Fort Moonmoth, only to be ambushed by Caius Casades, and knocked out, and dragged back to the Imperial prison, where he would rot and be set up for execution. However, Sheogorath himself spoke alongside the ghosts of the past, and Sheogorath told Liel'roz that this was only the beginning. And really, Sheogorath would have the divine intervention capable of freeing Liel'roz, and this would in fact be only the beginning. In fact, would only be the legend of Liel'roz. But alas, that is actually going to be it for the rest of this episode. I hope you all enjoyed this. This was a bit different than my usual videos, but yeah, I decided I wanted to basically speak about Liel'roz, wrap up good bits here. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this summary of Liel'roz's adventures in Morrowind, where he's been off to. And I am not going to continue Liel'roz's adventures into Oblivion next week. I will save that until first I want to do something special. It's been a while since I've done how-to videos. I am going to do something special with a bit of stealth archery in a few Elder Scrolls games. So, you know, stay tuned for that. But anyways, this has been your bro Frostbird, and I think I'm going to catch you on the next one. Later!